Rick Ector's gun right advocacy has been featured in the national news media. Among those citations, credits, and mentions are the following: the IRA's DL with Dana Lash, Comedy Central's Jordan Klepper Solves Guns, 2017, Associated Press, United Press International, and Fox National News. Locally, Rick's activities have garnered appearances and mentions in the following media: Detroit Fox News, Let It Rip Weekend, Channel 4 News, WXYZ, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, and the Charlie Langton Show. We really feel fortunate to have Rick with us tonight to give us instruction on how to respond and increase our chances of survival in an active shooter situation that unfortunately we're hearing about more and more. So please give a warm welcome to Rick Ector.
Good evening. How is everyone doing this evening? Good, good. Glad to hear that. Glad to be here. It's always a pleasure to come out and to meet with groups such as yourselves. It gives me an opportunity to share information that is a passion of mine, which is gun rights. I got involved with the gun rights movement approximately 13 years ago. I had the serious misfortune of being robbed in my driveway as I was coming home from work. And I know some of you are going, oh man, what a bummer. In some ways, looking back on that, it was really a blessing. It's actually an incident that was negative, but it really opened my eyes to a lot of things that were an issue. One of those things that was an issue for me, and which I discovered in hindsight, is that I was taking my personal safety for granted. And that's pretty much the theme of what we're talking about today, personal safety. You know, it was in the aftermath of that incident that I discovered that no one is guaranteed to be safe anywhere, and that your personal protection, ultimately, that responsibility belongs to one person and one person only. If you have no clue as to who has the ownership of your personal safety, I need only direct you to your nearest mirror. That person that you see in the mirror is the person who is ultimately responsible for your safety. It's not law enforcement. Law enforcement, you know, they're great, they do an admirable job, but the way that we utilize law enforcement in this country, because we have a free society, we have a society of rights, we would not want police officers standing on every corner. If we did that, we'd have the equivalent of a police state. As I listened to a lot of the things that I heard the prior speakers talk about, a unifying theme amongst all of the speakers, and I presume amongst people who are in this room, is that we value freedom and liberty. And if you really value that, you really value the fact that you have rights and that you're not monitored and controlled by the police or by the government, and that you have some say in what you actually do throughout your day and how to best make your life as happy as possible. Okay, great. So we have my PowerPoint presentation. We all love PowerPoint, right? Let me go back. I have to at least tell what it is. It's surviving an active shooter event. Okay. If we're going to talk about an active shooter event, I think it's appropriate that we at least have a working definition as to what we're going to call an active shooter event. It's one of those terms that people throw about, and some people actually think it's a misnomer. There's a really good friend of mine who I was just with a couple of days ago over at the gun range. When I have a need for a legal expert to teach small classes, I think I only had like 4 people in the concealed pistol license class that I was teaching this past Saturday. He came in and stepped in for my regular guy. And one of the things that we talked about was this concept of an active shooter. Exactly what is it? And it's one of his personal pet peeves that the active shooter term, he felt it's totally doesn't describe what it actually means. And as we were talking, he was like, well, if you're talking about an active shooter, well, couldn't an active shooter be someone, say, at a gun range shooting? And I guess literally, if we talk about the language, yeah, an active shooter is somebody at a gun range shooting. Or if it's in the appropriate season for the appropriate game, if a person is actually trying to take animals in hunting. We don't have any anti-hunting people in here, do we, right? Every fall, we all try to go out in the woods and get Bambi, right? The U.S. Department of Homeland Security defines it as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. In most cases, active shooters are firearms, and there is no pattern or method to the selection of victims. The one part of that I'm going to focus on because it tells us what an active shooter is and what an expanded definition of what an active shooter can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be firearms, and that's typically what we think about. But generally speaking, it does apply. And when we think of active shooter, an active shooter event is when one or more individuals go into a place and start creating madness and mayhem, whether it's firearms or not. And of course, the record for a mass shooting event didn't actually involve shooting, and it happened here in the state of Michigan. School bombing of 1927. 44 people dead. There was an individual, it was a teacher, he was involved in some malfeasance. He was caught and he was going to take his retribution out on the children. So he bombed the schoolhouse, and it stands as the state of Michigan's all-time record for homicides in a single event, a mass shooting, a mass killing. Probably the mass shooting event that really shocked the nerves of our country. Of course, I'm talking about Columbine High School. 13 dead, 23 wounded. This was the event that really got law enforcement's attention. It really drove home this new phenomenon to the general public about individuals who are willing to go into a public area and essentially use firearms or other devices to kill a lot of people for whatever reasons. Many times we don't know why they do these events. In a lot of cases they end up taking their lives, and so we have no way of trying to do, pardon the term, a post-mortem on the situation and try to figure out how to prevent these incidents from occurring in the future. Next. Sandy Hook Elementary School. This was an event that happened back in 2012, and this one, I mean, all mass shooting or mass killing events are definitely detestable. We should not take pleasure in having to witness them. But this particular mass killing was especially heinous because the bulk of the victims were very young and very small. I believe there were 20 second graders first or second graders, who actually perished in that event. The bad guy in this particular case was someone who had some mental issues. He, for whatever reason, took it upon himself to kill his mother, steal her guns, and go to the school and kill 20 school children and 20 workers at the actual school. So it was very distressing event to learn about. So when we talk about these mass shooting events, one particular good source of information is our very own federal government. The United States Department of Justice study, which looked at events between the year 2000 and 2013. It was a very exhaustive study that took a look at mass shootings, mass killings, and tried to figure out what information could we glean from these events, what could we learn from them. Maybe we could find something if we could stem these events, or maybe we could somehow be more proactive in responding to these events. Couple of things. 1,043 total casualties from the years 2000 to 2013. 486 murders, 557 wounded. So there's definitely a lot of carnage that occurs in these mass shooting events. Some good statistics, if you believe that in many distributions of data, the bulk of the sample, hope I'm not sounding like an engineering major, because yeah, guilty is charged, right? I'm very comfortable with math and statistics, but in this case, 67% of the incidents ended before law enforcement could get there. That's one of the most distressing facts about mass shooter or mass killing events. They typically happen and conclude very shortly before first responders can actually get there. Someone has made a plan to commit a lot of carnage, a lot of murder, a lot of destruction. They come in with the appropriate equipment, they get the job done. In most cases, they kill themselves, but it happens before first responders, before law enforcement can actually get there. The other fact, 70% of these incidents occurred in businesses or educational institutions. You actually look at the distribution of the data, of these data points, and you try to look at, well, how can we do the best fixes on this mass shooter, mass killer problem? Let's look at where they actually occur. 70% of them actually happen in what, for most cases, are de facto pistol or gun-free zones, places which are either statutorily defined in our laws as being places where you cannot legally carry a gun. When we're talking about educational facilities, we're talking about our entire school system, K through 12, and in our higher education institutions, our colleges and our universities. And the other remainder bulk of that distribution is going into businesses and workplaces where people earn a living. Many workplaces across a large variety of industries have anti-gun policies on the books, particularly for their employees and in a lot of cases for people that patronize those businesses. Personally, it's a personal safety strategy of myself not to go into gun-free zones, for the simple fact that these gun-free zones are the equivalent of attractive honeypots for people who have mental issues such that they have a desire to exact punishment and destruction and rain death upon people, and they want to get it done before law enforcement can stop them. The source of this data, of course, is a study of active shooter incidents in the United States between 2000 and 2013. Some of the places where all of these things happen, where all of these bad, negative shooter events happen for the years 2000 to 2013. As I stated before, if we look at just the top 3 entries, that's where the bulk of these incidents occur. Public businesses, businesses that are open to the public, 124 murders. Schools, educational institutions from kindergarten all the way through college, 117 killed. And of course, businesses that are closed to the public, 69. In this case, we have the top 3 categories basically represent 70% of the data. If we're serious about doing something with regards to stopping this problem, we shouldn't chase the small distributions or the small pockets or categories of data. We should go after the heavy hitters. We should go after educational institutions, and we should go after businesses which do not allow either their employees or visitors or patrons of those businesses to carry firearms. To carry firearms, and we'll talk about concealed pistol licenses and as it relates to the law as it exists primarily here in the state of Michigan. If you're going to do so lawfully, you have to follow the rules. Following the rules means not bringing guns into statutorily defined pistol-free zones. These are areas that the legislature felt in this infinite wisdom that if they were going to allow us to carry concealed pistol licenses, places where we shouldn't carry guns. Just as an aside, one of the things that attracts bad guys to places where our most vulnerable citizens, such as our children, one of the things that attracts these people to these areas is the fact that they know that they will not be opposed and that they have at least the response time that our public safety employees have to get to that location to stop them. So if they come with high firepower, they can effectively do their madness and their evil before they can be stopped, before they're killed or before they take their own lives. CL 237D. These are places where you cannot carry a gun. These are places such as banks, churches, courts, theaters, sports arenas, daycare, hospitals, places licensed by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, whether we're talking about a bar or we're talking about party stores and that type of thing. This is one area of the law. I will state that several exemptions do exist in the law, and one of those exemptions that exist for ordinary law-abiding citizens are people who have a concealed pistol license are exempt from carrying under this particular statute. Next. Michigan Gun-Free Zone 750.237A. This is principally talking about our schools. Unless exempt, you may not possess a firearm on school or on school property. Once again, there is an exemption that does exist for people who have a concealed pistol license. Michigan Gun-Free Zones, MCL 28.4250. These are places where you cannot carry a firearm concealed. These are places, if you've had a Michigan concealed pistol license, this is probably what was covered in your CPL class. By the way, just out of the sake of curiosity, how many people by show of hands actually have been issued a concealed pistol license? How many fellow CPL licensees are here? I feel very safe right now. Congratulations, yes, and thank you all for having a license, and thank you for carrying. We'll watch each other's backs. But of course, all of us who have concealed pistol licenses, we know the places where we cannot carry a firearm concealed to be school or school property, daycare center, child placement agency, sports arenas, bars, church, entertainment facilities that seat more than 2,500 people, a hospital, a college or university dorm or classroom, or a casino. Got to protect that money, right? Gun-free zones, other, right? Unless exempt, you may not possess a firearm on federal property, right? Anything federal generally is verboten, is a no-no, except, of course, federal parks where it is authorized under state law. So, for example, if you can carry a firearm here in the state of Michigan concealed, then you could do so in a federal park concealed. However, when you're in that federal park in the state of Michigan, you can't go into a facility on the ground, so you can't actually do something, you know, like use the public restroom because it's part of a structure. And heaven forbid you try to go natural or the nature route, you probably get charged and convicted of some indecency charge. Michigan concealed pistol license. This is what the requirements are, and they're fairly straightforward. As a CPL instructor, I pretty much am familiar with these requirements. Typically, you have to be 21 years of age. You have to pass a background check, take an approved training course, not have any issues with regards to mental health concerns. Basically, you take the class, you complete your application, and you submit it to your respective county clerk's office, and pending a background check and everything's okay, then you'll be issued a concealed pistol license. Laws that work in our favor. And the reason why these laws are relevant to our topic is because if we're really curious about being out in the general public and being able to render aid or assistance to someone who's in trouble, if someone is in the act of committing a mass shooting or mass killing event, and you are curious or you're interested or you would be willing to assist or to help save people, this basically is your authorization. In MCL 780.972, if you are located where you have a legal right to be and you're not committing a crime, if you have a reasonable and honest belief that you're in imminent danger of death, great bodily harm, or rape, you can use lethal force without a duty to retreat. So basically, this is your authorization. However, like any other thing that you're trying to take advantage of, your actions will come under scrutiny. If you come to the aid of another person and situation merits, you actually take action against a bad guy, they'll take a look at what happened and they'll do an investigation, and based on what happens, you'll either be exonerated, they won't have a ticker tape parade for you, or maybe you will find yourself prosecuted. The key concepts here is my good buddy, Mr. Terry Johnson. He actually does the legal in my concealed pistol license classes. One of his patented quotes that he says every time that he does the legal section when explaining when individuals can actually come to the aid of another person, Terry says, and I can hear it right now in my voice, know what you know. You have to know what you're getting yourself into. If by chance you've misread what actually has happened and you take action, you could find yourself prosecuted. In many cases in which you see something, your eyes may be deceiving you, and it may be an entirely different scenario, an entirely different situation. Definitely, you must know what you claim to know. Use your best judgment. Essentially, you're asked to use your best judgment and consider being a good witness. Sometimes the best thing for you to do is take notes, be prepared to make appropriate identifications, and be able to help law enforcement find the bad person. The last thing that you want to do is wanting to be the good guy or the good gal and help someone out in their time of need and find yourself on the opposite side of the law. Let's see, in pistol-free zones. This is the clue one here. This is very important, especially if we're talking about a mass killing event. In a pistol-free zone, your options are going to be extremely limited. If you find yourself as a CPL holder, and I know we have a lot of CPL holders here in this room, if you're going to be that law-abiding, responsible citizen that got that concealed pistol license, you're not going to be carrying a gun in a pistol-free zone. A lot of the stats that I talked about earlier basically drove home the fact that many of these mass shooting, mass killing events are going to be in gun-free zones. If you are in a gun-free zone, you don't have means of a firearm, well, your options are extremely limited. You're either going to run, you're going to hide, or you're going to fight. Probably under those circumstances, you know what? It may not be the most macho thing to do in the world, but you know what? Leaving the area probably is going to make a lot of sense. Hiding, man, I don't know so much about hiding, because you know what, you have to find a good spot and be quiet and hope that you're not really discovered. Your last option there is that you're encouraged to fight. They used to tell you that if you were in these circumstances and bad guys were there and they were taking action, your job was not to resist. Your job was to just give up and give in. Well, from some of the stats that we've learned in the aftermath of 13 years worth of data that they put together in the study, it didn't work out very well for those individuals who just gave themselves up. The now official public stance is that as a last resort, if you're unarmed, possibly you can band together with other fellow citizens who were there and make a stab at it and do your best to go ahead and fight, as opposed to just give up and quit, where you probably are going to perish, because the whole objective of these guys is to rack up a huge body count before they kill themselves. Realities of lethal force events. Should you choose to take action against someone who's doing a mass shooting or a mass killing event, these are some of the things that are realities for you. You may be injured or killed. That's a reality. Even if you have a firearm and you're using it to defend yourself or to defend other people. Here's a big one. You may be forced to take a life to save your own life. And that's not trivial. You know, a lot of people like to talk about the macho bad guy stuff, but it's not trivial to take someone's life, even if it's necessary or required to save your own or someone else's. In the aftermath, you may be arrested and you may be charged with a crime. You may be sued. Anything you say, of course, may be used against you, and you may go bankrupt trying to defend yourself. You may go to prison. You may lose your job. For many people, defending themselves, it doesn't end well for a lot of people. Sure, they survive, but some of the things that they have to live with and deal with in the aftermath are not quite so rosy. A few facts about legal representation. Should you find yourself using lethal force to defend yourself or defend some other third person in a mass shooting, mass killing, or otherwise? If involved in a defense of your person or another. Oh, that sentence got truncated, right? Where was I going with that, right? Oh, well, we'll figure that out later. My attorney figured it out. I have a right to an attorney, right? Funding a legal defense can be costly. There's a gentleman that I met fairly recently. He had undergone a self-defense issue. As a matter of fact, it was not necessarily a defense of self. It was a defense of another, a defense of a coworker. In the actual event, he actually had to shoot two guys who were presenting an imminent and credible threat to both him and this young lady, this particular coworker of his. His life was turned upside down. It was on hold for 1.5 years. He was wearing a tether, and he had this weight just weighing down on him with the uncertainty of what was going to happen. He was charged with 8 felonies. He was looking at possibly going to prison for a very long time for doing the right thing. Doing the right thing. Well, of course, you know you're doing the right thing. But the question becomes, if you're charged with a crime and you're put on trial, will those jurors unanimously feel the same way? Is there a chance out of 8 felonies that you're found guilty of one of them? In his particular case, at the 11th hour before the actual trial was going to take place, they came at him with a plea deal. That plea deal was plead guilty to a couple of charges, and you know what? With time already served, you'll probably only have to do 6 months or a year. This is a tough pill to swallow, especially if you thought you did the right thing. You might be tempted, given the fact that if you're found guilty, you might actually do a decade or 2 behind bars. It's a very tough decision to make. If you would consider defending yourself against a violent attack, you should consider how you're going to pay for a legal defense. We have at least one lawyer in here. Let me tell you, the good ones, man, it's going to cost you. But you know what? It's a small price to pay if it means that your honor is protected and it means that your freedom is safeguarded and that you do not go to prison. I haven't been to prison, but I hear it's not a very pleasant place to go. Let's see. How you can support gun rights. This is my thing. I'm a gun rights advocate, and I enjoy talking to people about their rights and what can they do to preserve those rights. Here in the state of Michigan, I will say that our self-defense laws are decent. They're not as great as they could be. I hope that we get a few things to actually make it better and easier for more people to have an opportunity to defend themselves. With regards to supporting your gun rights, there are a number of things that you can do to ensure that we always have the ability to defend ourselves against a criminal attack. First and foremost, you should support pro-gun candidates who are running for public office. It is my personal strategy. I refuse to vote for a candidate on any level, on the local, county, state, or the federal level until I at least know their position on guns and gun rights and how they feel about self-defense. It's a personal issue. I feel very strongly about the Second Amendment. If you're not pro-gun, pro-self-defense, I can't even consider voting for you. That's just where I'm coming from. Support pro-gun issues on the ballot. If there are measures that come before on the ballot and they're talking about opening up the ability to carry guns in more places, you should be supportive of that. As a matter of fact, just carrying a gun in public will increase the likelihood that bad guys will run into someone who's armed and who's willing to take action either to defend themselves or other people. And as a matter of fact, it's ironic that having a lot of people who are publicly armed and are willing to defend themselves, it actually makes our society safer for individuals who are anti-gun and who don't want to carry a gun. So we're actually creating an unsafe working environment for people who take joy and pleasure in hurting their fellow citizens. Another thing you can do, you can share info on gun rights issues with your friends and family members. If you're a pro-gun person, talk about why having access to guns, why it's good for our community. One thing that I usually tell people to do is if you run across a friend or a neighbor who maybe is ambivalent about guns, I have the perfect solution. Take that person to the gun range. Let them experience shooting a gun at the range, especially if it's their very first time. Let me tell you, that very first time of safely shooting a firearm at a gun range in safe, controlled conditions, it is exhilarating. It is like heaven on earth. When you're finished, it's like you're walking on clouds. You never knew how stressed you were until you actually let off a few rounds at the gun range. Other things you can do. Join pro-gun organizations. Organizations on the national level, of course, would include the National Rifle Association, the Second Amendment Foundation. Here locally, you have places such as Michigan Gun Owners and Michigan Open Carry, which are two good gun rights organizations here in the state that I would suggest you look into joining. The next option, right? Concealed pistol license instructor / gun rights activist. For those of you who do not have a CPL in this room, I'm thinking at least half have CPLs in this room. The fact that the one half has access to guns and are accessible is actually protecting the rest of y'all. I want you to take on a more active role if you're willing to protect yourself and, by extension, individuals who are in your community who are going to be safer because you're there and you are around and willing to contribute to their safety. Be aware of your surroundings. This is the big one. This is for individuals who are carrying firearms. Doesn't do you all that great of a good to carry a gun if you're not actually paying attention. Pay attention to what you're doing, who's around, who's watching you, who's checking you out, and who's thinking about attacking you. Some of the things that I'm seeing in the news media with regards to people being attacked. There are people that are being attacked and being victimized in broad daylight these days during actual waking hours. You know, it wasn't too long ago when only this type of thing only happened after dark. But definitely pay attention and watch your surroundings. It will give you an opportunity to at least respond and not being taken off guard. And of course, the next option, carry your firearm everywhere you legally are allowed to do so. By extension, hopefully you will join me in pushing our state legislature and voting for candidates who are expanding greater areas for us to lawfully carry firearms. Oh man, that's it. I made it. Thank you very much. If I could, I have my buddy here with me today, Mr. Terry Johnson. And Terry, he does the legal section in my classes. And he does like an awesome job in terms of letting individuals be apprised of what their legal rights, responsibilities, and duties are under the law. Carrying a firearm, yes, it is a right. I get that. I believe that. I also believe it requires you to be responsible. And one of the things that I have Terry do is actually read my students, these prospective individuals who are going to pursue getting a concealed pistol license. He's basically reading them the Riot Act and making sure that they understand what their responsibilities are. One of the things that Terry talks about in the class is that there's responsibility that goes along with using lethal force to defend yourself and your fellow man. But with using that lethal force, sometimes you may not have a smooth ride with regards to defending yourself. Maybe the powers that be, maybe local government, police officers, or the prosecutors, maybe they don't see the event like the gentleman I was talking about, Mr. Marcus Wild and the Santa Claus shooter. Maybe they don't deal it the same way. I'm going to ask Terry to share just a few minutes about what you can do to ensure that you're able to put on a good defense should that need arise and your actions come under scrutiny. Can we give Mr. Terry Johnson a hand to come on up here?
Worst thing you can ever do is give an attorney a microphone, right? Okay, first line I'm going to tell you is I'm only going to be 3 minutes. You ever heard that like the attorney say, I got one more question, it goes, oh, no, seriously, I'm not going to be before you long. Before I start, I want to say thank you. I'm an elected official on the Farmington Public School Board, and it is great to be here with some people that have supported me. And we need more conservatives at the grassroots levels and the school boards. That's where a lot of this starts. So I want to start that. I want to say that. Real quickly, Rick talked about what happens, you know, in the event you're involved in a shooting. Let me say this, and I'll be very brief here. Number one, if you believe that your local police, regardless to what city you live in, are going to come in and the first thing they're going to see is you wearing your shirt that says good guy across your chest, and the bad guy has his bad guy shirt on, the police are going to come in and they're going to say, oh wow, great, good job, you got the bad guy. They're going to give you a pat on the back, tuck you into bed, haul the body off, and it's going to be over, right? Doesn't work that way. What's going to happen is you will be taken in. You will face, in some cases, prosecution. Some of you will have to make that tough decision. Do I pay an attorney or Am I pretty enough to get out on my good looks alone, right, if I go to jail, okay? These are decisions you have to make, okay? I'm the regional director for a company called Firearms Legal Protection. I bring that up just to say we have a plan that can really help people out who have CPLs or who just use any form of lethal defense. Our plans are as low as $9.95 a month, and it gives you uncapped attorney's fees. Uncapped attorney's fees, and all of our attorneys are very, very good. I bring this up for no other reason than I say we need to protect ourselves. Because what they're doing nowadays is the following. They are actually forcing people who use guns lawfully, they're making examples out of us. Because they're putting us away. And they're making us choose because we're going bankrupt because we've got to mortgage our house. We've got to go take our money out of our kids' education fund. We have to band together. Our company is founded, and I am glad to say this. This is one reason I slowed my practice down and started doing this. My company is founded by a group of Christians down in Texas. And the great thing, yeah, that's worth clapping for. It's great when I go down to business meetings that we actually have Bible study during work hours on Wednesday. We pray before we have our meals down there. It is just awesome. And what we have tried to do is protect those people who are protecting themselves. If you'd like more information on this, you can see myself or Linda, who can wave in the back there. Linda, she is standing, believe it or not. That's a short joke. I'm going to get it on the way out. You can see us and we can get you signed up. But thank you and God bless.